Emily never imagined that marrying a billionaire CEO would change her life in ways she couldn't control. What started as a cold, calculated contract worth $2 billion quickly spirals into something far more complicated. Logan West, the powerful CEO she married for money, isn't the man he seems. Beneath the ruthless businessman facade lies a man torn by loneliness and hidden desires. As the 6-month agreement draws to an end, Emily faces a choice: walk away with her fortune or stay and explore the deep, undeniable connection growing between them. But what happens when the line between business and love blurs? The CEO offered $2 billion just to marry me for half a year. It wasn't supposed to be a memorable Monday. Emily Carter had started her day like every other for the past few months, half asleep, broke, and running late. Her coffee machine coughed up something resembling battery acid, and her manager at the local marketing agency had already sent her 3 emails about a client she didn't even handle. Her rent was overdue, her shoes had a hole in them, and she had exactly $3.45 in her checking account. But it only takes one moment to change everything. That moment came in the form of a tall, suited man standing outside her apartment complex just as she was about to step into her dented 2006 Honda Civic. He looked out of place like a movie character who had walked onto the wrong set. "Miss Carter?" he asked. She blinked. "Yeah, Mr. West would like to see you. Now." Emily paused. "Mr. West is in Logan West?" The man gave a curt nod. "The CEO. Yes, a car's waiting." Emily didn't know what was more shocking, the fact that Logan West even knew she existed, or the fact that she didn't feel scared, just confused. 20 minutes later, she was sitting across from him, the Logan West, billionaire, chief executive officer of West Tech Industries, known for revolutionizing the tech industry by the age of 30, also known for being colder than a January blizzard in New York. He looked exactly like the tabloids described: sharp-jawed, immaculately dressed, and emotionally distant. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked without looking up from his tablet. Emily shook her head. "No, sir." He finally looked at her. His eyes were steel gray and unsettlingly unreadable. "I need a wife," he said simply. Emily blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "A wife. For 6 months. A temporary arrangement. Strictly legal. In exchange, I'm offering $2 billion. Emily felt her jaw nearly detach from her face. "Is this some kind of joke?" "No." He leaned back in his chair and folded his arms. "My father passed away recently. His will stipulates that I must be married for at least 6 months in order to inherit West Tech. Otherwise, it goes to my cousin, a man who can barely turn on a computer." "And you want me to marry you?" she asked, still half convinced this was some elaborate prank. "Yes." Emily stared at him. "Why me?" "Because you're not a social climber, you're not in the media spotlight, and you're smart enough to keep this quiet. I need someone who won't fall in love with me and cause complications." Emily almost laughed. Almost. "So, you're offering me $2 billion to marry you for 6 months, pretend to be your loving wife, and then vanish?" "Essentially, yes." "And no other obligations?" she asked. He tilted his head. "It depends what you mean. There will be public appearances, dinners, occasional travel. We need to appear convincing. But no, there will be no physical relationship unless mutually agreed." Emily couldn't believe the words coming out of his mouth. Or hers. "And if I say no, then I find someone else. But I prefer you." "Why?" He hesitated just for a second. "Because you looked me in the eye just now, and no one does that." Emily stood. "I need time to think. You have 48 hours. Then the offer expires." The next 48 hours were chaos. She called her best friend Zoe, who screamed so loud Emily had to pull the phone away from her ear. "Girl, are you insane? $2 billion? That's B billion with a freaking B." "It's not that simple, Zoe. He wants me to lie. Be his trophy wife. Fake love in front of the whole world. For 6 months, that's like what? 180 days? That's $11 million per day, Em. You could buy a small island. Or 5. Still, Emily hesitated. What would her late mom think? Her dad had abandoned them when she was 9. And Emily had spent her entire life earning things the hard way. But she was tired, tired of struggling, tired of working double shifts and eating instant noodles, tired of wondering if she'd make rent. And there was something about Logan, something wounded under all that ice. On the morning of the third day, she found herself walking into West Tech headquarters again. This time she didn't feel scared. She felt in control. Logan was sitting at his desk. He looked up as she walked in. "Miss Carter, I'll do it." He didn't smile, but there was a subtle shift in his expression. A flicker of relief. "Very well. The contract is ready. Our lawyers will go over the details with you. The wedding will be in 2 weeks. Public but small. You really don't waste time. Time is money." As she turned to leave, Logan said quietly, "Thank you." Emily paused. "Don't thank me yet," she said. "This ride's just getting started." 2 weeks flew by in a blur of designer fittings, fake wedding planning, legal documents, and media prep. The world didn't know it was fake, of course. All they saw were headlines. Billionaire CEO Logan West announces surprise engagement to mystery woman. A Cinderella story in the making? Logan and Emily kept it professional in public. Behind the scenes, it was more complicated. He was rigid, private, methodical, but he also listened when she spoke. He had a dry sense of humor that surfaced at the oddest times. He remembered she hated olives. He asked about her late mother's favorite flower. And Emily, she tried not to notice the way he rolled his sleeves up when he was stressed, or how his jaw tightened when reporters asked about his father, or the way his hand lingered just a second longer than necessary when they posed for engagement photos. The night before the wedding, she couldn't sleep. She stepped out onto the penthouse balcony of the suite West Tech had rented for her. Logan was already there, staring at the skyline. "Cold feet?" he asked. "More like frozen legs," she replied. He actually smiled. A real one, small, but there. "We don't have to go through with it," he said. "You can back out anytime." "Too late, I already said yes, and I'm not a quitter." He looked at her for a long time. "Neither am I." They stood in silence for a moment. The city below them buzzed with life. In a few hours, the world would see them as husband and wife. A lie. But maybe not all lies are created equal. And sometimes lies have a strange way of becoming the truth. The wedding was surreal, more like a performance than an actual ceremony. Emily stood before the altar in a stunning yet simple white gown. The delicate lace design whispered elegance, and the soft chiffon fabric flowed around her like an ethereal dream. Her hair was styled into soft waves that framed her face, and her makeup, though flawless, was light, just enough to highlight her natural beauty. But none of it mattered, because the man standing beside her wasn't someone she had ever imagined herself marrying. Logan West was, without question, the most striking man Emily had ever seen. His black tuxedo fit him like it was custom-made, which, knowing his wealth, probably was. His sharp jawline was even more prominent under the dim chandelier lights. His gray eyes were cold and unreadable, his expression as stoic as ever. He looked every bit the part of the wealthy, emotionally unavailable businessman he was. But as the priest spoke the words that would bind them together, Emily couldn't shake the strange sense of familiarity that settled in her chest. She had never imagined this kind of life, marrying a billionaire for 6 months, with no love involved. But now, standing at the altar, a part of her wondered what might lie behind Logan's cold exterior. Was there more to him than the persona the world saw? She didn't have much time to reflect on that thought. The priest asked if anyone had any objections, and for a brief second, Emily's heart skipped a beat. Was she really doing this? Was she really agreeing to a temporary marriage for $2 billion? The answer came quickly when she looked at Logan. His eyes met hers, and for a fraction of a second, there was something there. Something she couldn't quite place. It wasn't warmth, but it wasn't coldness either. It was the slightest flicker of something real. Maybe it was the same uncertainty she was feeling. With a deep breath, Emily nodded, affirming her decision, and the priest moved on, sealing the deal. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur of flashing cameras, fake smiles, and hollow words. They exchanged rings, his a massive platinum band with a diamond the size of a pebble. Emily barely registered the touch of his fingers as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It felt strange, almost like an out-of-body experience. Before she knew it, they were pronounced husband and wife. The applause felt deafening, but it wasn't for her. It was for Logan. He was the one everyone was focused on, the billionaire CEO who had just completed a strategic business move. The wife? Well, she was just the trophy, the means to an end. But Emily wasn't foolish enough to let it bother her. She had made her choice, and she wasn't going to regret it. Not yet, at least. The reception was as extravagant as one might expect for someone like Logan West. It was held at a lavish ballroom in the heart of the city. Everything was meticulously arranged. The table settings, the floral arrangements, the lights, all designed to give the illusion of love and romance. But for Emily, the love was absent. She knew it was all for show. No one was fooling her. They danced the first dance, and the moment their bodies came together on the polished floor, Emily felt a wall between them. It wasn't physical, but it was there. Logan was distant, his arms stiff, his gaze barely meeting hers as they twirled in sync to the slow song playing. She wanted to ask him about his life, about the things that haunted him, but the thought was quickly pushed away. She had no right to pry into his world. She was just the temporary bride. After the dance, Emily excused herself to the balcony. The cool evening air hit her. About him directly, but sometimes when Emily would ask about the company, his voice would tighten and he would change the subject quickly. But she couldn't pry. Not yet. She wasn't supposed to care about the man she had married for 6 months, who had paid her to pretend to be his wife. But a part of her wanted to understand him. It was a weakness she couldn't shake. After all, they were bound together by a contract, but that didn't mean they couldn't share a real connection. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of press conferences, they were alone in the penthouse. Logan was sitting on the couch, his fingers absently flipping through a magazine as if trying to distract himself. Emily stood by the window gazing out at the city. She had learned to block out the noise from the reporters and the photographers. It was the only way to keep her sanity intact. "Why do you do it?" she asked suddenly, her voice low. Logan didn't look up. "Do what?" "Hide behind this mask, this persona you put up, the cold CEO, the businessman who doesn't care about anything but money and power. Why do you do it?" She turned to face him, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Why not just be yourself? Why pretend?" Logan set the magazine down and leaned forward. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, Emily saw something, an emotion flicker in the depths of those gray eyes. It wasn't anger. It wasn't indifference. It was something softer, almost vulnerable. "I didn't ask for this life, Emily. I didn't ask to be the son of a man who was always more concerned with his legacy than with his family." His voice was low, almost strained. "I didn't ask to inherit this company. I didn't ask to be the person everyone expected me to be." "Then why don't you fight it?" Emily asked, stepping closer. She couldn't help herself. Something about the rawness in his voice was drawing her in. Why keep playing the part? Logan sighed and leaned back into the couch, rubbing his temples. "Because I don't have a choice. If I show any weakness, they'll tear me apart. If I show any emotion, if I let my guard down, they'll use it against me. I'm not allowed to be human, Emily. Not in this world." Emily's heart ached for him, even though she knew she shouldn't. She was just his wife in name, a temporary arrangement. This wasn't supposed to be personal, but it was hard to ignore the hurt in his eyes, the way his body language screamed exhaustion and frustration. "I didn't ask for this life either," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't ask to be in this position, to be trapped in a marriage that means nothing, to be paid to play a role." Logan's gaze softened, and for the briefest of moments, he seemed to understand. He stood up, walking over to the window where she was standing. They were close now, so close that Emily could feel the heat radiating off of him. She didn't step away, and neither did he. "I know," he said quietly, "and I'm sorry. But we're stuck with it, aren't we?" Emily nodded, her chest tightening. They were stuck with it. They were both playing a game, pretending for the sake of appearances. But it didn't change the fact that they were both human, both struggling with their own demons. The silence between them stretched on, thick and heavy. Neither of them knew what to say next. Neither of them knew how to break down the walls they had so carefully built. Finally, Emily spoke again. Do you ever think about what happens when the 6 months are over? Logan's eyes met hers, and there it was again, something unspoken. A moment of truth, fleeting but undeniable. He didn't answer right away, but when he did, it wasn't with his usual coldness. It was softer, almost uncertain. I try not to, he said, his voice low. But I don't know, Emily. What happens when it's over? Do we just walk away? Maybe, Emily replied quietly. Maybe we walk away and maybe we don't. But one thing's for sure, we can't go back to being strangers after all this. For the first time since their arrangement began, Emily felt like Logan wasn't just a business transaction. He was a person, a man trapped by his circumstances. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the only one who felt the weight of their contract. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized the clock was ticking. They didn't have time for deep emotional connections. Their arrangement had a clear deadline, 6 months. After that, they would go their separate ways. But was it possible to walk away from something that was beginning to feel more real than either of them had bargained for? The next day, Emily and Logan attended another gala, another event designed to keep up appearances. But this time, something was different. The tension between them was palpable, lingering in the air as they posed for pictures and answered questions. The cameras flashed around them, capturing their perfect smiles, their posed affection. But Emily knew the truth, it wasn't real. And yet, part of her wondered if maybe in the mess of it all, something real might still emerge. As the night wore on, she caught Logan's gaze across the room. For a fleeting moment, their eyes locked, and the world seemed to fade away. It was a moment of clarity, of understanding. Maybe they were both trapped in this charade, but maybe, just maybe, they weren't as alone as they thought. Emily couldn't help but feel the weight of her decision every day. The $2 billion Logan had promised her felt distant now, as if they were tied to a future she wasn't sure she wanted anymore. The agreement had seemed straightforward at first, a business transaction, a quick way out of her own financial struggles. But as the days passed, the illusion of an easy life began to crack. The ballrooms, the luxury, the endless photo ops, they were all part of the grand performance. But behind closed doors, there was something else. Logan West was a man who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. And as much as he tried to hide it, Emily could see the cracks. The cracks that began to show when he thought no one was looking. He didn't need her to play the role of a wife. He needed her to play the role of the perfect distraction, the perfect trophy. He had made that clear on their wedding night, as he lay in the bed beside her, offering no affection, only cold words and a carefully crafted persona. But that night, as they lay there in the silence of their shared space, Emily began to question something deeper. Was there more to Logan than he was letting on? He wasn't the only one with a mask. Emily had been hiding behind her own. The smile she gave at every event wasn't real. The polite nods to the press and the crowd weren't genuine. The only real thing was the growing curiosity inside her about the man who had offered her such a peculiar deal. Logan had made it clear that this marriage was temporary, but there were moments, small moments, that felt more like the beginning of something. Like when she'd catch him looking at her with an unreadable expression, or when he'd brush her hair from her face absent-mindedly. His touch was fleeting, but it left her wondering if there was something between them that neither of them wanted to acknowledge. But every time Emily found herself asking these questions, the reality of their situation would hit her. She was here for the money. She had to remind herself of that. The gala after party was one of those nights where Emily couldn't escape the reality of her life. Surrounded by high society, the clinking of glasses, and the laughter of people who lived in a world so far removed from her own, she felt out of place. Logan stood beside her, his hand lightly resting on her back as they made their way through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries with the elite. His presence was commanding. His tall frame, his impeccable tuxedo, the way he moved through the crowd as if he owned the room. Emily couldn't help but feel like an accessory, something to be shown off to the world. He was always the star of the show, and she was simply the shadow that followed him. But what bothered her most wasn't that she was playing the part of the perfect wife. It was the feeling that Logan wasn't just using her as a prop. He was distancing himself from her in ways that made her question if he ever saw her as anything more than a pawn in his game. She excused herself from the party and stepped outside onto the balcony, needing a breath of fresh air. The cool night air felt like a welcome relief against the heat of the crowd. But just as she was about to lean against the railing, she felt a presence beside her. Logan. He didn't say anything at first. He simply stood beside her, looking out at the city lights. The silence between them wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either. It was more like an unspoken agreement that neither of them would acknowledge what was happening between them. Finally, Logan spoke, his voice low and quiet. "Are you all right?" Emily didn't answer right away. She wasn't sure how to respond. The question felt genuine, but at the same time, she couldn't shake the feeling that it was part of the performance. Still, she couldn't ignore the way his eyes searched hers, looking for something. "I'm fine," she replied, though her voice betrayed her. "Just needed a break from all the attention." Logan nodded, his hands in his pockets. "I get it. It's not easy living in a fishbowl like this." Emily turned to face him fully, studying his expression. For a moment, the coldness that usually defined his demeanor was gone. There was something more human in his gaze now, a flicker of vulnerability, of weariness. She didn't know if she should feel sympathy for him or if it was just another act. "Why do you do it?" she asked, her voice quieter than before. "Why keep up the charade?" Logan sighed, a small, almost imperceptible movement of his shoulders. "I didn't choose this life." Couldn't bring herself to move away. "I needed someone," he said quietly, his words heavy with a truth that was both painful and liberating. "I needed someone who would stand by me, someone who would be there, even if it wasn't real, someone who would understand the weight of this, everything I carry. I knew you would never care for the money. You weren't like the others." Emily's chest tightened. He was speaking of the loneliness that he had always hidden so well. Logan West, the CEO, the billionaire, he was just a man after all. A man who needed someone to see beyond the power, the wealth, the business empire. But it didn't make sense. How could she, someone who was only in it for the money, be the one he turned to? Why her? She took a step back, shaking her head, trying to make sense of it all. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for any of it. I thought we were both playing a part." Logan's jaw clenched, and for a moment, Emily thought he might pull away entirely. But then, to her surprise, he reached out, his hand brushing against her arm, sending a ripple of warmth through her. His touch was gentle, hesitant, but it was enough to stop her in her tracks. "You're not just playing a part, Emily," he said softly. "I never wanted you to be just a part of the game. You think I'm cold, that I don't care. But it's never been that simple. Not for me. And I don't think it's that simple for you anymore either." Her breath caught in her throat. His words hit her like a punch to the gut. She had spent so long convincing herself that this was just a business transaction, that there was nothing more between them. But deep down, she knew it wasn't true. The attraction was there. The connection was undeniable, even if she had tried so hard to ignore it. I don't know what to say," she murmured, feeling her heart race in her chest. "I never thought we would get here. I never thought I'd feel this way." Logan's eyes softened, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she saw him not as the CEO, not as the businessman with a cold exterior, but as a man who had been struggling, just like her. A man who had been hiding behind his own walls, afraid to let anyone in. "You don't have to say anything," Logan replied, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Just don't walk away. Not yet. Please." His plea hung in the air between them, and for a long moment, Emily couldn't speak. She had come into this situation with one goal, to get the money and leave. But now everything had changed. What they had was no longer a contract. It wasn't just about the $2 billion. It was about something deeper, something neither of them had expected to find. "What if I don't want to leave?" she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and for the first time in months, she felt like she was finally being honest with herself. Logan's expression softened even more, a flicker of hope crossing his features. He stepped closer, and this time, there was no hesitation in his touch as he reached for her hand. The warmth of his palm against hers sent a rush of emotions flooding through her. "I never wanted this to be a game, Emily," he said, his voice full of raw honesty. "I never wanted to be alone in this. I never wanted to pretend anymore." Emily looked up into his eyes, and for the first time, she saw the man behind the CEO, the man who had built an empire but had never learned how to truly live, and in that moment, she knew that she wasn't alone anymore either. "I don't know what the future holds," she whispered, her fingers intertwining with his, "but I'm willing to find out. Together." For the first time, Logan smiled, a real smile full of warmth and something that felt like relief. And in that moment, Emily realized that they weren't just two people caught in a deal anymore. They were something else entirely, something fragile, something real. As the night stretched on, they stood together in the stillness of the penthouse, no longer bound by the contract they had once signed, but by something much deeper, something neither of them could have predicted. The story they had started together was only beginning. And though they didn't know what the future would bring, they knew one thing for sure: they were in it together.